In this episode, we are going to refactor the home component in our Angular application. We are going to divide the big block of HTML code in the home page into small components so that we can reuse these components in other pages. To follow along easily, it's recommended to refer the written tutorial so that you can have access to the source code and learn at your own pace. Without any further ado, let's get started. In the last episode, we just dumped in the HTML code for our homepage into the home component.html file. Let's go through it step by step and try to understand the code. So we just have a container div, and inside that we have another div with class row. Then we divided this row into two columns, one with a width of 9 units and the next column with a width of 3 units. Inside the first column, we have again a div which displays the post information as seen in the comments. And this div element contains ng_for directive which is looping through all the posts which we are receiving from the post service. So if the post variable contains 4 posts, for example, this div will be repeating 4 times. And inside the div, we again have two columns. The first column has 1 unit of width. And as you can see in the comments, this section is used to mainly display the vote information for our posts. And inside this div, we have two icons, one above and one below the vote count div. This element displays the vote count for this post. So these icons are coming from the Vote Awesome library. We will install this library, see how to start working with these icons. And so the next column contains the post information. This div is 11 units wide, and here as you can see, we already have all the post information we need. This column first contains the subreddit name, and after that the name of the author of the post, and also the duration. That means how much time back this post was submitted by the user. The next field is the post name, followed by the description and the number of comments which are associated with this. We have another icon in the section, an icon for comments. We will also shortly see how this looks. Now let's install the Vote Awesome icons in our project. The first dependency to add inside our package.json file is Angular Font Awesome, followed by Font Awesome SVG core and Free Solid SVG icons dependencies. These are the latest versions for each of these dependencies at the time of producing this episode. If you somehow provided an older version number, VS Code automatically suggests to update to the latest version, so you just have to click on the section and run npm install. After running npm install, we have to enable the Font Awesome module in our project. So I'm going to open app-module.ts file and add this module information under the imports array, and also make sure to add the import statement for this module from Angular Font Awesome library. Now we have to import the required icons into our home component.ts file from the Free Solid SVG icons library. So I'm going to import the icons FA arrow up, FA arrow down, and FA comments. And these properties are already tied to our HTML file through the icon property. So we just have to declare these properties inside our home component.ts file. Now if you go ahead and open the application inside the browser, you can see the up and down arrows along with the icon for comments. But one thing which looks strange is that the home component and the header component are overlapping. We can fix that easily. By adding the CSS to our styles.css file. We basically added a margin top value as 63 pixels for our body. If you go and check the application, you can see now the home component is not overlapping with the header component anymore. Okay, now let's go ahead and try to break down this home page into different components. For that, I'm going to use the screenshot of the final version of the home page to get an idea how we are going to refactor this page. So in the home page, we have many posts to the left side of the screen, and to the right side, we have the sidebar section where we can create posts and subreddits. And we have another section where we can view the subreddits which are created in our application. So we are going to divide this mainly into 4 components. The first one is called as post tile component, which contains the information needed for each post. And inside this component, we have a voting section which contains an up arrow, a down arrow, and the vote count. We will create a separate component also for this section called as vote button component. The next two components are the sidebar component and the subreddit view sidebar component. So let's go ahead and create those components one by one. I'm going to put those components inside the shared folder under the app folder because we can reuse these components to display in multiple pages. Now let's copy and delete the code which is displayed just below the display post comment. You can easily copy the code by first collapsing this div element to just 2 lines. And after that, let's delete this code. Open the post style component.html and paste this code. As we are in a different component now, we no longer have access to the post variable inside the post style component. As we are reading the post inside the home component, we have to either move the code inside the post style component or pass this variable posts as input down to the post style component. I would prefer to move the logic from the home component because from now on, this component serves only as a placeholder. So I'm going to go inside the home component.ts file and remove the injected post service class and also the method call to get all posts from the home component's constructor and add it to the post style component.ts file. Let's also transfer the font awesome icon properties to the post style component.ts file. So the selector name of this component is app post tile. Let's go ahead and declare this inside our home component.html file. We should also add some CSS for this component. For that, I'm going to take help from the written tutorial. Under the post style component section, copy the CSS under the post style.component.css file and paste it inside the project. Now inside the post style component, we have to extract the vote button component. So I'm going to again collapse the div section with class call mg1, copy and delete it. Open the vote button.component.html file and paste that code. Now to display the vote count inside the vote button component, we need also access to the post information. So for that, let's provide the post object as input to the vote component. So I'm going to create an input property called as post of type post model. Let's copy the selector for the vote button component and declare it inside the post style component.html file. And to the selector tag, pass in the value for the property post. Let's also copy the necessary CSS from the written tutorial and copy it inside our vote button component.css file. Next up, it's time to add logic inside the sidebar and subreddit sidebar components. Also here, I'm going to copy the HTML and CSS code from the written tutorials and paste it inside our project. Now for subreddit sidebar, we have to read the subreddits from our backend and display them under the section. Let's quickly have a look at our Swagger REST API documentation, and you can see that we are receiving the following properties as response for the subreddit API call. For that, first let's create the service file which makes the HTTP calls to our backend. I'm going to create the service using the command nggs, which stands for ng generate service subreddit/subreddit. This should create a subreddit service.ts file under the newly created subreddit folder. Now let's also create a model class which holds the response from the subreddit HTTP call. I'm going to create a file called as subreddit response.ts, and I'm going to create a class which contains the field ID, description, name and number of posts. Inside the subreddit service, first I'm going to inject the HTTP client inside the constructor, and I'm going to create a method called as getAllSubreddits. Inside this method, I'm going to make a HTTP call to the getAllSubreddits API. Let's add the array of subreddit response class as the generic argument for the HTTP get call and specify the return type as observable of array of subreddit response. Now let's open the subreddit sidebar component file and inject the subreddit service. And inside the constructor, let's add the call to the subreddit.getAllSubreddits, and let's subscribe to this response and assign the response to the subreddits variable which is declared inside the component. This property is already bound to the HTML as we have an ng-for directive which is displaying the subreddit names for all the subreddit responses. Now one thing we have to observe here is the list of subreddit response can contain any number of records, and if we just reiterate and display all of them, and we'll face problems while rendering the section. That's why it would be a good idea to limit the number of values we display in this section, and if there are more than say 4 records in the array, we will display a view all button which takes us to a new page and display all the subreddit information. For now, let's add this view all button to our section. We can add that by declaring a boolean flag first inside the subreddit sidebar component called as display view all, and inside the subscribe method of the get all subreddits call, if the response contains more than 4 entries, we will use the splice method to take a subset of only 4 values from this array and display those values inside the section. Or else we just assign the array as it is to the subreddit property. Before checking our refactored homepage inside the browser, we have to make some additions to the vote button component.ts file. We have to move the FA arrow up and FA arrow down properties from the post tile component.ts to the vote button component.ts file. And lastly, I'm going to copy the selectors for sidebar component, subreddit sidebar component, and add them to the right column of the homepage HTML file. Now if you open the application inside the browser, you can see the list of posts along with the vote button component to the left side of the page. And on the right side, we can see the sidebar, which contains the create post and subreddit buttons. And below that, we have the sidebar with subreddit information along with the view all hyperlink. So that's it for this episode. I hope you find this series interesting and you're able to learn something. In the next video, we are going to create a post and subreddits from our Angular application. We still have 2 episodes remaining in this series, so I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, happy coding.